Adam. How are you doing, bud?
Hey, not bad. How y'all doing?
Doing well. I imagine it's been a fun start to the season for covering this team. I mean, I know as reporters we're objective, but let's be honest, covering a winning team is a heck of a lot more fun than covering a losing one. And you've been on the ground floor of one of the best stories in college football this season.
Well, yeah, and it's a little different for Vanderbilt in that they've started well. Under Derek Mason, they have traditionally started slow, finished far better. Last season the season seemed to be in the tank. They started 2-4, and they won 4 of the last 6. They beat Ole Miss. They won at Athens over Georgia. They beat Tennessee, and all that came at the end of the season. But by then, some people had kind of quit paying attention. So the fact that they've started 3-0 in this one, beat a ranked team in Kansas State, they're at least having an opportunity to kind of hold on to the fan base early this season.
Certainly, the program experienced some highs under former coach James Franklin, but I'm wondering, in terms of excitement right now in Nashville, I mean, outside of the Predators, which everyone seems to be in Nashville a big fan of, they're out of season. This Saturday's game, where do you think it ranks in the modern era of Vanderbilt football? They get that CBS 2:30 game. They're getting the number 1 team on their field. They got the number 1 defense. Where would you say this would rank in terms of the modern era of Vanderbilt football?
Well, I mean, it's pretty high. Now, the result, I would say, would be the easier thing to rank it. If Alabama comes in and wins by 30, it's going to be forgotten pretty quickly. In terms of an opportunity, it's one of the best that they've had, and not just because Alabama is number 1. They played some pretty good Alabama teams in the past. Although the last couple times they played, those weren't, at least the last time Alabama was here in 2007, that wasn't an elite Alabama team, obviously, but they've had opportunities where they've played, top 5 teams, and they've done it at home just playing in the SEC, but they haven't done that with a team that you felt like if things went right, they could have a chance. So I think there's a difference between kind of a marquee matchup and a matchup that you feel like on a given day you can compete in it. And I think most people around here say, well, okay, Alabama is the heavy favorite, and they should be, but what if these 3 or 4 things happen in this game? If Alabama suddenly turns the ball over, if Vandy plays the defense that they have so far, if Kyle Shermer throws the ball like he has, if Ralph Webb, the running game, comes along like it did last year, there are at least enough factors that you can count on one hand. If it went Vanderbilt's way, they could be in this game.
Adam, is there a buzz in the town? I mean, Vanderbilt's such a kind of a unique place in terms of SEC cities because it's not really a traditional college town. There's so much to do there. It can be hard to gauge. But covering the team, do you get a sense that there's a buzz around town about this game?
Well, I'll be curious to see how it looks like Saturday, because before Vandy's win over K-State this past Saturday, most anybody that I talked to said, well, the crowd will be 80-20 red. It'll be about 80% Alabama. This last week, the game was sold out against Kansas State. It was about 50-50, maybe 60-40 Vanderbilt, but there was a whole lot of Kansas State people here. So is that still 80-20 Alabama, or has there been enough time for tickets to change hands somewhere in there since what happened Saturday? I know this morning they announced that all the student tickets have been sold for Vanderbilt. That's very, very rare at Vandy to have all the student tickets sold. So I will be curious. There's a buzz, yes, it's a pretty big buzz, but a buzz does not take tickets that are owned by one fan and suddenly give them to another in a few days. We'll see how that looks Saturday.
Yeah, that's a good point, because Nashville's kind of a hub in the South for SEC alumnuses of all schools. So a lot of Alabama alumnus and alumni up in Nashville. You know, Adam, one thing when you're looking at this Vanderbilt defense, obviously the numbers just jump off the page at you, allowing less than 100 yards passing a game. They're up there in nearly every defensive category. But the thing that jumps out when you watch them play is some of these, I don't know how to even describe them, some of these unique defensive fronts that they show that are meant to confuse quarterbacks and offensive lines and are doing just that. What makes that front in what Derek Mason is doing on defense so unique?
Yeah, I actually asked Derek in the press conference today about that because you see, and I'm sure you saw some of the photos on Twitter about how odd these things look. Sometimes he'll have two defensive linemen, a two-man front, and then he'll have five guys kind of standing and roaming around. And it's a 3-4 base, but that is very loosely a 3-4 base. They have all kinds of strange fronts. I asked Derek about that today, and, he kind of shrugged it off. I think he doesn't want it to be looked at as a gimmick, but it's not. It's something that they've kind of grown into. 2 or 3 years ago, Derek Mason took over the defense. He's his own defensive play caller, does not have a coordinator. In his second year in 2015, he took all this defensive knowledge that he used at Stanford, and he just threw it on top of these guys, and it confused them. And a lot of the players that year that could not understand kind of his eclectic, exotic scheme, he took all that stuff off of them, simplified it, added a little more last year, and those freshmen, sophomores that were confused that first year are now juniors, seniors, and have understood all the intricacies of what they do. I mean, it's intended to confuse quarterbacks. It's intended to confuse offensive linemen. They did not have a very effective blitz last year. That's one thing that was missing. This year they do have that. They've been really good with the pass rush. And that's come from a lot of those. It's two things. One, the exotic looks that they show you. And number two, they have this wide range of guys that are just these long, lean, athletic types. They've done a lot with taking defensive backs, safeties, nickels, putting about 30, 40 pounds on them and converting them into linebackers. And so they've got a lot of athletes, long athletes, that can play multiple positions, and that's helped them a lot with the pass rush.
Talking to Adam Sparks, covers Vanderbilt for the Tennessean. I think most SEC fans knew Zach Cunningham. If you didn't, shame on you on the way he played last year, and has started off on a pretty good pro career too. Who are some names on this defense that maybe aren't household names that we should know?
Oren Burks was a preseason All-SEC. He's kind of known as the most complete player maybe on this team. He's again one of those guys that has played safety most of his career, moved to linebacker last year. He's an inside linebacker. Emmanuel Smith is another inside linebacker. He's their leading tackler. Charles Wright is their sack guy. He's an outside linebacker. Nephi Lale. Some people may have seen Nephi's quote on TV. I think he made SportsCenter the bring on Alabama or Alabama's next sort of thing. He's a really good defensive lineman that probably is undercut some because his job is to take on double and triple teams to kind of free up those linebackers, including Zach Cunningham last year. But I think he has a lot of respect by coaches around the league. This is a defense that has had success in the past, but there seems to be kind of another level to it this year. Oren Burks, the linebacker, today, when we asked him about, you're number one in the country in scoring, you're number one in total defense and yards, but Alabama's kind of the standard of defense. How do you see that matchup? And his quote was, and maybe it's paraphrasing, but we want to show that we're the best defense on the field when Alabama comes here Saturday. It's a pretty big statement, but you could tell it wasn't something that was off the cuff. It's something he had thought of. So Vandy sees this game, especially on defense, as one where they can show that they're up to the highest standard, which is Alabama.
Kyle Shermer is one of the most efficient quarterbacks in the conference, if not the country. I think he's completing about 69% of his passes and has no interceptions thrown on the year. Incredibly efficient. What are they asking him to do in this offense? Is it very much like what they're asking Jalen Hurts to do? I mean, there's not the running element, obviously, but Alabama does a really good job mitigating the risk around Jalen, and it seems like the way Vanderbilt's playing, they're playing to their strength, which is a dominant defense.
Yeah, and the difference with Kyle Shermer is just been time and experience. The game plan against Vanderbilt now is the same as it was last year and the year before. It is stack up 8 guys in the box and contain Ralph Webb, the running back, hold him down as much as you can, and the passing game is not going to beat you. It's been the same game plan so far for opponents this year. It's just that Shermer is far more experienced. He's been with these receivers now for quite a while. Most of these wide receivers were starting or pretty integral in the receiving corps as freshmen, and they're seniors now. So a lot of it is just time. And they have now been able to take advantage of defenses loading the box. Derek has been asked, and Kyle Shermer's been asked the last couple of weeks, when is an opponent finally going to say Vandy will beat us with their pass before the run? Let's get off of the line and respect the pass. So far, that has not happened. You thought Kansas State may have done that because Vandy has not been able to run the ball great yet so far. But that hasn't happened. I'll be interested to see how Alabama approaches it. And if they have the personnel, they can do both, obviously. But you still kind of have to pick what you're going to do against Vandy. And so far, everybody has picked, let's stop the run first, and Kyle Shermer's made them pay.
Yeah, it's not a bad. You understand why people do that. I mean, Ralph Webb is I don't want to call him the one-man show. There's some other running backs they have, but he's by far and away their leading rusher in terms of attempts. Got nearly 60 carries on the season. By contrast, Alabama's got 4 guys that have at least 20 carries, including Jalen Hurts, who's the leading rusher on the team. What is it about Ralph Webb? He's been in this conference a long time. His resume speaks for itself. Was nominated for a ton of preseason awards. But you mentioned the running game hasn't been as dominant. Is that more the offensive line?
Yeah, it's the offensive line. They brought back 3 starters, but if you look at the guys compared to last year, there's only one offensive lineman actually playing the same position as he did last year. They moved the right tackle to left tackle. They have a new right tackle. They moved their guard to center. And so they've moved around a lot of guys, and the unit has been good in pass protection, which they focus so much in the preseason on, but they have not developed that kind of gritty, run-over-people type attitude as far as run blocking yet. And I don't know that you can really develop that going into a game against Alabama. Most of the issues have been the offensive line. Ralph Webb is just kind of one of these grinded out. He came in with kind of this, Rudy type idea of, hey, he's small, but he tries hard and he's not fast, but he grinds out yards, that kind of thing. He's developed his body, and you can't tell it from the press box, but he's developed his body more into a guy that can break long runs now. He can shed tacklers. He's a lot stronger than you would ever imagine just looking at him. He's top 15 or top 20 right now, SEC career rushing. Durability has been a big thing with him. He's on pace right now to challenge Herschel Walker for the most carries ever for an SEC running back in his career. He's had 40 starts, has started every game of his career, all the way back to the first game of his freshman year. So when you've got a guy like that, you can just pile 30 carries on every game of his career. He learned some things, and I think he has learned how to finish runs, how to make that extra cut, and he's kind of a self-made running back.